divine masters of the light. Yeah, and thank you for being here today. So today's video is how to identify ego statements. The ego has many statements that it gives. What we want you to do is to look at the 5 types of statements the ego gives. So number 1, the first one. No one can absolutely tell you you're an ego, but people can get a hint of your ego, right? And many times they can help you discover your ego, but only you can discover if it's ego or not. Number 2, ego statements adhere to specialness rather than uniqueness. Somehow saying I am special, special good, special bad, special indifferent, special. I am special. The third characteristic of ego statement is that they tend to justify and rationalize rather than take responsibility and be understanding. The fourth thing is ego statements tend to deny rather than accept. Deny responsibility, deny awareness, deny understanding, deny instead of accepting. Deny responsibility, right? The fifth ego statements are blaming and punishing statements rather than loving or forgiving statements about yourself or others. To see for yourself, when you have looked at these, and decide for yourself, which types of statements do you tend to do most frequently? What's your particular, handle when it comes to displaying your ego and functioning in that particular place? Making your statements to get a feel for that, because that probably will be, if you find it, it will be the one you tend to do the most frequently. Think about those 5 ego statements. That would be very much the ego trying to get a hold of you and your reality. You see, the way you function with the ego and see what it does and how it plays out in your reality. Also have some idea of the particular characteristics of the messages you give yourself are all about. You can then be in a much stronger position to be looking at, actually of releasing or transforming the ego. Well, what should you do? Number 1. There's not a statement that you could make that is not potentially an ego statement. Okay? Those messages basically can be condensed down to I can do it all by myself, or I don't need anybody, or somebody else has got to do it for me, or I am the best, or I am the greatest discovered, but nonetheless I am the worst, the most despicable, or the most lonely, and ranges from the position very clearly that I am already spiritually evolved. More than you, right? Or there is nothing more I need to learn. I know it all. Or I am so unevolved that I'm too broken to fix. Or I can't possibly learn something new. Or I never make mistakes. Or I always do things right. I am perfect. Or I never do anything right. I am always wrong. I am always imperfect. Or no one likes me. Or I'll screw it up. Or I am a failure. Or why me, etc. In other words, the messages of ego are not limited. They can run all levels and days, from I can't in 1,000 ways to I am the best in 1,000 ways. Opposites are both egos in the sense. I am the best or I am the worst. It's the same position of ego. I have no problems or I have nothing but problems is a total negative ego. I have released all my blockages, or my blockages are so real and powerful I can't even get a hold of them or heal them. I'm too broken. They are all both positions of ego. I can't do it all by myself. My guide is God, or nobody can help me. I am too perfect, or too evolved, or too high, or I am too so low that nobody less than God could possibly help, or I can heal, or I can't heal. We would suggest here very clearly the full spectrum of possibilities, that there is not a statement that you could make that is not potentially an ego statement. That's officially scary. You mean it's everywhere? Yes, it could be, because it all ties into attitude. That's really the but for a lot of people. If it formed where you could see it, measure it, where you could define it and put a rope around it, then I could handle it. But when it's attitude, damn it, how do I know if I have handled it or not? Beats me, I guess. But we would suggest very clearly here, it is an attitude behind the statements. It is not the statement in themselves, nor truly so if you go around saying and thinking, I really am far beyond any growth, etc. I know it all already, etc. Surely you can recognize it's ego, particularly in spiritual ego and other people. But many times is the subtleness of the statements. We have often talked over and over and over again about perfection as really being an ego position and wanting to do, be better than everybody else, is what poor me, I can't do it perfectly, or poor me, I just get so hung up on being perfect as an ego position. Absolutely. We would suggest victimhood is very clearly an ego position. It really was bad for me. I really can't do it. Or I've tried but always fail. Why bother? Or they really did those terrible things to me. Or it really was awful what they did to me. Or poor me, life is tough, is very much an ego position. Number 2. Ego statements adhere to specialness rather than uniqueness, somehow saying I am special, special good, special bad, special indifferent, I am special. Right? The malicious obedience that we often talk about in terms of doing everything to the letter of law, to the letter of activities is ego. Even changing the form, hoping that will change the content in the context is an ego position. You see, it's everywhere. That's it. If it were formed so that it could be harnessed very neatly, then it could be put together. This is your ego wonderfully for. Anytime you do any of this, you're an ego. And if you don't, you are not. Then you could adapt very pleasantly and never be an ego ever again. We would suggest it's not that. It's an attitude that lies behind it. And that means you're the only one who can tell the truth about it. You're the only one who, when you say, God, Goddess, I feel good, I did a fantastic job at that, you're the only one who is going to know whether that's an ego position by saying, oh, ain't I the greatest? Or an adult position of honest recognition and acknowledgement. No one can absolutely tell you you're an ego, but people can get a hint of your ego and many times can help you discover your ego, but only you can discover your ego if it's ego or not. Even the statement, I really worked on my ego and gotten off it. Only you're going to know if that's the ego speaking or not. However, certain characteristics of attitude tend to show up in ego statements, right? There are certain similarities, right? They're in all ego statements. Ego statements of all dealing with specialness as opposed to uniqueness. Either in the statement overtly or covertly is a message of I am special because, rather than I am unique because. You see, there is nothing wrong with uniqueness. Uniqueness is something you need to develop as a matter of fact here. But we would suggest here, when you find the specialness in the statement, example, wow, was I having this terrible problem with my family and I cleared it all up. Now, is that the feeling good about it, or is there a specialness applied therein? You decide. Ego statements adhere to specialness rather than uniqueness. Somehow saying I am special, special good, special bad, special indifferent, special more gifted than another, special how? How do you say you are special to yourself and others? How do you puff up your ego with specialness? Are you stuck in your ego specialness? You are all unique, and that is beautiful. How do you bring your unique gift to the world to assist another? I am special because, or I am unique because, one is ego and the other is self. Which one do you always use? Number 3. The third characteristic of ego statements is that they tend to justify and rationalize rather than take responsibility and to be understanding. Is what you are saying coming from your ego, right? When you hear yourself justifying a position or rationalizing an action as opposed to accepting responsibility and understanding circumstances, you can be pretty well sure it's an ego statement. It's probably coming from the ego. It always involves explanation. Explanations are weird because sometimes they are necessary, sometimes they are not. Right? We would suggest many times explanations are the ego speaking. If someone says they are really angry at you, or they are really hurt by you, or they feel misunderstood by you, or they somehow feel any other way than positive about you, if you find yourself immediately explaining that, defending that, explaining why they shouldn't feel that way, or why they do, then you can be fairly well sure that's a justification, rationalization, very clearly. And you can be sure that's your ego. Yeah, but is an explanation important? Won't that make them feel better in time? Perhaps. But we would suggest here, the first thing out of your mouth then is ego. So clamp your mouth shut and don't explain anything for many minutes. Then you are no longer an ego, right? 20 minutes. No, seriously, if you do find yourself, someone is saying something to you, and right away you find yourself explaining it and defending it. Oh, well, the reason that happened was, I misunderstood, or no, I did not mean that, etc. No, for sure you are not listening to them, right? You're coming from ego because you're trying to rationalize your position rather than trying to understand theirs. Even if they are totally wrong, you know you're angry because you didn't call last night. And that reason you didn't call is that your phone dropped in the water, was busy, an emergency, having your hand bandaged, etc. Even so, if that's the first thing out of your mouth, then you're coming from ego instead of understanding how they are feeling and where they are coming from. And that's what's going on with them about it. And then after that, you might want to explain you dropped your phone in the water and had a bandage put on your hand. Number 4, the fourth thing is ego statements tend to deny rather than accept and take responsibility. Deny responsibility, deny awareness, deny understanding, deny instead of accepting. Deny responsibility, right? How many times do you deny responsibility? What responsibilities are you denying and running from, hoping will go away? Those things lost in the past are coming up to the present now. When we look at the past and go about our day-to-day life, the past we thought we forgot about comes up. The past becomes ever so present in our future reality, and now we have to deal with it. You see, when the past comes up, it exerts influence on us, such as we fight, flight, or freeze when responsibility is needed. You see, there are responsibilities you're meant to take and responsibilities you are meant to do. However, remember, there was a time when you genuinely thought you did not have to take responsibility. You could skip school all day and not go to work. Who cares? I'll be young, alive, and free forever without a care in the world. Right? However, today taking responsibility is not a choice, is it? Responsibility is knocking at your door. And instead of completely ignoring when responsibilities arise, responsibilities become a way of life now. The choice is more like when I take responsibilities, not if I even take responsibility. We have to face our responsibilities now. No more running from the past, which the ego likes to do. Oh, I got to run from the past. The ego may see it easier to refer, blame, or direct the responsibilities onto another, but I can no longer do that now, nor deny it. Every single person will be faced with responsibility, and each person will have to do this. I now know this, so be it to that. Most of us will take responsibility when an event occurs, or I'll take it later. That's my choice, but I will always have to take responsibility now, where once ego could run or avoid responsibility, we know we have to face it now or later, but we'll have to face it, our responsibilities. No more allowing your ego to run or pass the buck onto another. Our ego tells us if I bullied enough, intimidated enough, cried enough, I stuck to my lies enough that I was telling myself and others, if I was strong enough, etc., I would not have to take responsibility. You're only fooling yourself here, okay? Ask yourself, what about those responsibilities you ran from and ignored when you're younger? They are coming back around full circle. Are you going to fall back into the old destructive negative ego fight, flight, or freeze behaviors? Or are you going to face your responsibilities head on? Yeah! You see, there are responsibilities you are not lost, but hidden in the past. With the past gone, stripped away, the responsibilities remain. Some may label the responsibilities we did not take it in the past as present karma, or others will call it a crisis, but in reality is the responsibilities you ran from in the past that are coming full circle back around for you to face. Yeah, exciting. No more running from yourself. Take responsibilities. At first, we work through our responsibilities so we can grow stronger and positive ego and self together. And when in times get tough, we face them instead of running from them, as a negative ego always does. So building a relationship with love, responsibility, commitment, devotion, joy, etc. builds a bond of we can do this. Positive ego. If I just take it on and stop running from myself. Yes. Every time you blame another with a negative ego, you avoid taking responsibility for yourself, divine ones. What responsibilities is your negative ego running from, hoping will go away? Number 5. Fifthly, the ego statements are blaming and punishing statements, rather than loving or forgiving statements about yourself or others. So, when you hear yourself talking, hearing that voice inside your head, if it is blaming you, punishing you with shit, right? You dumb person, you failure like always. You can't do anything right. You'll never get off this, You're a total washout. Give up. No one likes you. End your life. Forget it. Growth isn't for you. Healing isn't for you. I'll leave you. for your, for your good. Blaming and punishing yourself. That's how you hide your ego. This can't possibly be ego. If it were ego, I wouldn't be blaming myself. I wouldn't be punishing myself. I would rather be saying I'm right and they are wrong, instead of I'm saying no, they are totally right and I am totally wrong. Could possibly be ego. If it's a blaming, punishing statement, it most likely is ego. We would almost say absolutely so. But then you find the exception, 20 of you are skewering, looking for the exception. Spend the next 6 months of your life trying to find that acceptance. But we would suggest for sure, if you are surely blaming and punishing others, and not too often many of you are dumb enough to do that blatantly, just write out it's your fault. Most of you do it very subtly. Understand, I know why you did that. You couldn't help it. You are just not intelligent enough to figure it out yet. You haven't involved with growth as long as I have. You just can't help it. The blame and punishment you put out on others, it's not so much the words you say, it's the thoughts that you are thinking. Oh, I'm really sorry, but all the, yama yama days, those bastards, they did it to me. It's all their fault. If they have done it right, I'll get them, etc. Make them feel guilty. I'll apologize and really take responsibility like a picture perfect. Then they will feel bad afterwards and wish they never made an issue of it, etc. I'll show them very clearly is the ego. That's what the ego says. Those are the 5 characteristics of ego. Firstly, no one can absolutely tell you you're an ego, but people can get a hint of your ego. Many times can help you discover your ego, but only you can discover if it's ego or not. Number 2, ego statements adhere to specialness rather than uniqueness. Someone saying I'm special, special good, special bad, special indifferent. I am special. Number 3, the third characteristic of ego statements is that they tend to justify and rationalize rather than take responsibility and be understanding. The 4th thing is ego statements tend to deny rather than accept. Deny responsibility, deny awareness, right? Deny understanding, deny instead of accepting. Deny your whole life. Number 5, the 5th statement, ego statements are blaming and punishing statements rather than loving or forgiving statements about yourself or others, right? You can tell us this is an ego statement generally. We would not want to suggest, oh, it's not this, therefore it's not ego. But we would suggest here, if you look at that, is this what is going on right now? Is it my ego? I don't know. I can't tell. My ego is so crafty. No specialness. My ego is so crafty is ego specialness. Right there. That's ego. Before you even ask the question, yep, got it. Your ego is not so crafty. Your ego isn't smarter than anybody else. And your ego is dumb. We would suggest here it operates in that sense very dumbly, but you can't outsmart it. It's craftier than you, but it's still dumb. So what does that say about you? Here is this file clerk in your reality who is running the show, and you can't outsmart it because you're not thinking and growing up, not taking responsibility, always looking for the simple answer, really don't want to believe you. Create it all. Don't love yourself and are so afraid of loneliness you can't kick the ego out. That's why it outsmarts you. But those 5 characteristics are the hints of ego statements. Specialness, the tendency to rationalize and justify. Denial, punishment, avoid responsibility and blame as opposed to uniqueness. Accepting responsibility and understanding. And accepting your reality you created. And loving and forgiving. Now that doesn't mean that if you're really mad at someone or you just can't forgive them yet, doesn't mean you're an ego necessarily. It could. But we would suggest here, if it's a statement, the thought behind it is non-forgiving and non-loving, is punishing and blaming, then you are pretty well sure it's ego. And we would suggest, and we have often suggested, the ego speaks quite profusely and almost consistently. So that's some ways you can tell the statements, not really tell by the message, but the characteristics behind the statements, the attitude behind the message that you speaking, hearing, seeing, and feeling. Right, Divine Ones? Yeah, thanks for listening to me today. This is Chris Parr, Syrian and Lemurian, Love and Wisdoms and Teachings.